Greetings. It is a true pleasure to greet you from the U.S. Embassy today. I'm Alexandra King-Pyle, Political Unit Chief, and I'm honored to kick off the Women's History Month celebration with an interview with a very impressive and accomplished civic leader, and she's also a 2014 International Visitor Leadership Program alum. So, Ms. Linda Kasonde, welcome, Linda.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. It's absolutely a pleasure and an honor to be here today.
Great, thanks for being here. So let's jump right in. The first thing I'll ask, can you just introduce yourself and tell us about your experience being a young woman leader in the civic rights space?
Okay, so I am a lawyer and activist. I'm the executive director of an organization called Chapter One Foundation. Chapter One Foundation is a civil society organization that promotes human rights, the rule of law, constitutionalism, and social justice in Zambia. And I've been involved in the civil society space for, I'd say, at least 12 years, with or without a title, so in various capacities over the years. So it's been a journey full of ups and downs, but certainly very rewarding. There's certainly been a lot of highs, some lows, but I think I can look back on my time in civil society and say there are definitely things that we've achieved during that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. So the theme for International Women's Day this year is called Break the Bias. There's a hashtag, by the way, Break the Bias. And the idea is to create a more gender equal world. So we'd like to get your thoughts on how men and women can work together to challenge those gender stereotypes and promote equality in their communities.
Well, I think the first thing that we need to do, not just in Zambia, but across the world, is actually acknowledge and respect the fact that it is important to have women at leadership levels all across the spectrum, because they have a particular perspective on life, different lived experiences from men, for example. And so it's important to have that representation at all levels of society. People often say representation matters. So just as an example, I once listened to a radio program on the BBC of the then Swedish foreign minister narrating a story of two warring factions fighting over a river on a map. And at the time, there'd only been men around the table. And when they finally introduced women to the conversation, the woman pointed out that that river had dried up several years ago, and that in fact they were fighting over nothing. So just as an example, just having that representation there can make a huge difference to whether it's conversations over peace, reconciliation, and just general leadership. So acknowledge first that it's important to have women at the table. And then secondly, also recognize that in our society here in Zambia, but also across the world, women are socialized to kind of be in the background, not to take a leading role in things. So there does need to be some kind of deliberate effort, I'll use the word affirmative action, to try and promote women's participation in leadership positions. And I believe that once we have that critical mass of women in leadership, gender will no longer be an issue. People will see, for example, less cyberbullying because it won't be so much about the fact that it's a woman. So all in all, we need to be heading towards that critical mass of women representation at all levels of leadership.
Mm-hmm. What a good point about how it has to be something constructive and intentional. This Absolutely. Is not going to happen just by accident, right? Mm-hmm. So I talked a minute ago about how accomplished and impressive you are. I wanted to highlight something. So in 2016, this is when you were first elected president of the Law Association of Zambia, and were the first woman to be elected to that office. We're curious to know, since that time, which seems like it was recently, but it's been a few years, right? So what opportunities have you seen open up for young women in Zambia? And for that matter, what challenges still remain?
Well, just using the example of that election and becoming the first female president, when my team and I were campaigning, it was evident that many people didn't believe that a woman could perform that role effectively. Particularly because it was an election year, that was 2016, we were having general elections, and it was felt you needed a tough man to do the job, etc. And in fact, some of the feedback that I heard from my team are people saying things like, doesn't Linda read the Bible? Doesn't she know that men are supposed to lead? She's power hungry. For example, I was a named partner at the firm that I was working at the time, and they said, well, isn't it enough that she's she's that? So there was a lot of bias in that. And I think that that myth has been dispelled to some extent, that the women can do the job. And in fact, in 2018, I believe, there was another woman who stood for the position of last president. She didn't win, but I believe that her gender was not an issue. It just wasn't on the table so much at the time she stood. And I'd like to believe that, we want to see a place where women are no longer the first of their kind in any particular position. And it happens incrementally. For example, we've seen at Zika, the first female president of Zika, which is a welcome development. And the more these barriers are broken, the more people will see that these things are not insurmountable, that you can do it if you work hard, you focus, and you've got a good track record, which I'm afraid women have to have more of than men. For example, when we were campaigning, I had been in the Council of LAS for quite some time, a number of years. So technically, I was the most experienced candidate. But even after demonstrating my track record, people were like, oh, what else? But they weren't asking the other two candidates the same thing. So there is that bias that still exists. But I believe, as I say, through focus, hard work, commitment, and a good track record, you should be able to excel and exceed.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And so we want to thank you for paving the way, for putting those cracks in the ceiling so that now it's not a strange thing to hear a woman is running for president of LAS or any other important aspect of civil society. So speaking of your work in civil society, can you highlight for us and for our audience some organizations that and advocates in Zambia that are leading those efforts?
There's the traditional ones like NGOCC, Women's Lobby, YWCA, all of whom create a safe environment for women to be able to excel and also amplify women's voices. And then there's newer organizations such as Young Women in Action, who are doing amazing work. Harriet Chibuta is their executive director, a brilliant lady. And also in the private sector, you also see mentorship initiatives such as, I think it's called She Leads or something, run by Mzinga Melu. And previously there was Alchemy, Alchemy Women in Leadership as well. So there are various avenues through which women are promoted in the country. And of course, Chapter One Foundation also does its part. I'm sure you're aware that we're championing a case which is trying to challenge the fact that there's a lack of diversity in gender, youth, and disabled persons representation at the highest levels of our country and going downwards as well. So that case is ongoing, and we wait to see the outcome, and hopefully it will be in our favor.
Thank you. So then finally, I'd like to ask what advice you would share for other young women who are encountering barriers to achieving equal participation in their respective professional fields. How can we create opportunities to, for example, mentor them or just help them through this process at this point in history?
Okay, I think firstly, at a personal level, it's important to have a peer group that supports and also pushes you to be better. And at another level, and also create that sense of community where you can sort of bounce ideas off, exchange ideas about the challenges you're facing and possibly finding solutions to those challenges. And then also identifying people in your sphere of, well, who you're connected with somehow, or maybe not even connected with, who you admire, and perhaps identifying that person, maybe asking them for advice, or possibly even developing into mentorship. But also, I think it's important that we start at a very young level. I think we start having these conversations a bit too late, when people are already in their careers, and there needs to be more work done at the sort of primary to secondary school level, where ideas are really being shaped and formed. And we need to see, for example, alumni of whether it's universities, schools, going back and giving back by mentoring young people, or at least showing them that there's a different way of doing things, or different opportunities that they can seize. Which brings me to the mentorship question. How can we do that? There definitely needs to be, again, a deliberate effort of organizations coming together and saying these are the areas of need, particularly in the disadvantaged areas, and showing them that, for example, they can go to university. It's not out of reach if they work hard and they get the right grades. It needs to be a concerted effort, all the way down from primary school, leading up to adulthood.
Great, thank you. And anything else you would share about your experience as a woman leader in civic society, or any other advice that you would offer to people who, for example, may admire you from a distance and would want to know?
Sometimes it's not easy to follow your purpose, but if you're convicted about it, then you should stay the course, if you feel it's the right thing to do. And the challenges will be there. It's unfortunate that our society, and I suppose it's true of societies all around the world, like people to conform. But I would say don't be afraid to be yourself, and to push those boundaries and to break those barriers. But make sure as you do so, you find your support group that will help you along that journey. Very important. So, basically to all women out there, you can do anything that you set your mind out to, and I know you can do it. I look forward to seeing what the amazing things the women of Zambia will be doing in the future, and they are doing amazing things now. So I think International Women's Day, of course, is a day where we celebrate these women, and I celebrate all the women of Zambia who are doing wonderful things, even in small ways. So thank you to all of them.
And thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Alexandra.
It has been a pleasure chatting with you today. I look forward to doing it again soon, and I hope you have a wonderful International Women's Day.
Thank you, same to you.